ختم ہو گئی. صلوات. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. صلوات.
بانو یہ عابد کو بتلا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے. کہہ دو ہواؤں سے آہستہ آئیں کہہ دو پرندوں سے گلنا مچائیں کہہ دو اندھیروں سے واپس نہ جائیں کہہ دو اندھیروں سے واپس نہ جائیں. جاگی ہوئی چین کچھ پا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے. شاید رسن کی اذیت ہوئی کم مدھم کروش بیبیوں شور ماتم سجاد زنجیر بولے نہ اس دم سجاد زنجیر بولے نہ اس دم. شاید غموں کی گھڑی جا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے. یہ شام غریباں کی جاگی ہوئی ہے تماچوں کے ڈر سے نہیں سو سکی ہے. ذرا پھر گلے سے رسن جو کھلی ہے ذرا پھر گلے سے رسن جو کھلی ہے. سکون سے جو اب سانس لے پا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے. مگر یہ ہوا کیا کہ زندان رویا ساتھ بچی کا سویا، نہ جاگی وہ عابد نشانہ ہلایا، نہ جاگی وہ عابد نشانہ ہلایا، اب ماج کہتے بھی شرما رہی ہے، میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے، میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے۔ صلوات۔
بار دیگر نعرہ صلوات، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآلہ۔ آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین، تیرا چہرہ تیری آنکھیں بھول کب پائی حسین، چلتے ناکے سے گرایا، خود کو جلتی ریت پر، چلتے ناکے سے گرایا، خود کو جلتی ریت پر، گٹھنیوں کے بل میں تیری لاش تک آئی حسین، بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر، بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر، پھر کسی مشکل میں گھر کر میں نہ گھبرائی حسین، بہہ رہے تھے آنکھ سے آنسو تیری رخصت کے وقت، بہہ رہے تھے آنکھ سے آنسو تیری رخصت کے وقت، پھر کوئی آنسو نہ ٹپکا، آنکھ پتھرائی حسین، پھر کوئی آنسو نہ ٹپکا، آنکھ پتھرائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے
گدا بھائی حسین.
صلوات
صلی اللہ محمد. جناب قمر عباس کا ایک بہت قدیمی لاہور کا سلام ہے، وہ پیش کر رہا ہوں. مل کر ایک صلوات پیش کریں. صلی اللہ محمد و آل محمد.
ماں کہتی تھی اٹھ جاگ میری جان سکینہ. ماں کہتی تھی اٹھ جاگ میری جان سکینہ. اٹھ گھر کو چلے کھل گیا زندان سکینہ. اٹھ گھر کو چلے کھل گیا زندان سکینہ. ماں کہتی تھی اٹھ جاگ بندے جو تیرے شمر نے چھینے وہ دلا دوں. بندے جو تیرے شمر نے چھینے وہ دلا دوں. ایک ننھی سی چادر میں تیرے سر پہ اڑا دوں. گھر جانے کا اب ہو گیا سامان سکینہ. ماں کہتی تھی اٹھ جاگ. ایک بار میرے سینے سے لگ جا ذرا اٹھ کر. ایک بار میرے سینے سے لگ جا ذرا اٹھ کر. کہتی تھی یہ ماں قبر سکینہ سے لپٹ کر. کچھ دیر کے ہم ہیں تیرے مہمان سکینہ. ماں کہتی تھی اٹھ جاگ. معصوم سے گالوں پہ تماچوں کے نشان ہیں. معصوم سے گالوں پہ تماچے بھی ہیں کھائے. رو رو کے کہا کرتی تھی بابا نہیں آئے. نہیں لاکھ اٹھایا ہے کئی بار، لو مر ہی گئی آج وہ بابا کی عزادار، لب کھول ذرا ماں ہے پریشان سکینہ، بن تیرے سکینہ بھلا میں کیسے جیوں گی، بن تیرے سکینہ بھلا میں کیسے جیوں گی، بیٹھوں گی سدا دھوپ میں پانی نہ پیوں گی، جائے گی تیرے غم میں میری جان سکینہ۔ اور آخری شعر، میت پہ سکینہ کی حرم نوحہ گنا تھے، میت پہ سکینہ کی حرم نوحہ گنا تھے، چہرے پہ سکینہ کے تماچوں کے نشان تھے، لو مر ہی گئی شام کی مہمان سکینہ، ماں کہتی تھی اٹھ جاگ میری جان سکینہ، اٹھ گھر کو چلے کھل گیا زندان سکینہ۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، الحمد للہ رب العالمین، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والإبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والعطار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الرذبية والجود التقوية والنقامة النقوية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم وقرآنه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قال ربك للملائكة إني خالق بشرا من صلصال من حمأ مسنون فإذا سويته ونفخت فيه من روحي فقعوا له الساجدين فسجد الملائكة كلهم أجمعون إلا إبليس أبى أن يكون مع الساجدين. قال يا إبليس ما لك أن تكون مع الساجدين؟ قال لم أكن لأسجد لبشر خلقته من صلصال من حمأ مسنون. قال فاخرج منها فإنك رجيم. إن عليك اللعنة إلى يوم الدين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The verses which I just recited are the ayat from Surah Al-Hijr, the 15th chapter of the Holy Quran. Within these verses, you find that Allah, He speaks about the creation of Adam and the respect which was given to Adam by His divine command. And in reality, even though this incident is speaking of Adam, it is setting a precedent for the rest of humanity that how should you conduct yourself towards the Khalifa and the representative of Allah upon this earth. The ayat, they state, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي خَالِقٌ بَشَرًا مِّن صَلْصَالٍ مِّنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. That, O Prophet of God, remember that time when your Lord said to the malaika that I am going to create a human being out of dried clay made of aging mud. فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ السَّاجِدِينَ. After I have proportioned him and I have breathed my ruh and my spirit into him, then at that moment fall into sajda before this individual, fall into prostration before them. The Quran says, وَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ, that all of them, they do sajda illa Iblis, except for Iblis, he refused to be amongst those who were sajideen. Now over here, after these ayat are finished, you find that Iblis, he gives an interesting reply. Because in these verses, when Allah, he describes Adam, he says that I created this human being out of dried clay made of aging mud. In other words, this was the tarif and the introduction of Adam which Allah gave to the malaika. But now over here you find Iblis, he uses the same words that Allah used in the praise of Adam to tell Allah, oh Allah, I won't do sajda before Adam. Iblis, he says, Allah says, قَالَ يَا إِبْلِيسَ مَا لَكَ أَن تَكُونَ مَعَ السَّاجِدِينَ. What is it with you that you're not doing sajda with those who prostrate? Iblis, he says, قَالَ لَمْ أَكُنْ لِأَسْجُدَ لِبَشَّرٍ خَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ مِنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. Oh Allah, that human being you made of dried clay of aging mud, I will not do sajda before him. In other words, the same words which Allah used in the praise of Adam, you find Iblis is using those same words to lower the Khalifa of Allah. Now, if you see anywhere anyone uses the kalam of Allah or the Quran to take away from the status of Allah's Khalifa, you find those individuals are following upon the footsteps of Shaitan and Satan. Because you find he was the first to carry out that action. You see, from over here, the first lesson that we gain is that when it comes to the ta'deem and the respect of Allah's vicegerent and his Khalifa, this precedent was set from the creation of Adam. And that's why in a different ayat from Surah As-Sad, you find that Allah, he rephrases the wording once again. That he says to Shaitan, that why do you not prostrate lima khalaqtu biyadaya? That why do you not prostrate before that which I created with my hand? Astakbarta am kunta min al-alin? That either you are arrogant or you are amongst those individuals who are aleen and elevated. In other words, there were a group of individuals upon the creation of Adam that they were so elevated that they were exempted from doing sajda before Adam. Either Shaitan was arrogant or Shaitan was from amongst those individuals. So the point in conclusion that's being made is that the precedent for ta'deem to Allah's Khalifa has always been there. Now when it comes to the issue of Ziyarat, that does Ziyarat have a precedence in the Quran? Or does Ziyarat not have a precedence in the Quran? We reply by saying the moment Allah said, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, that I am creating my vicegerent upon this earth, the issue of Ziyarah was solved at that moment. Because the only question you have is that, is this God's Khalifa and vicegerent? If he is God's Khalifa and vicegerent, then his ta'deem and respect is mandatory. And if he's not Allah's Khalifa and vicegerent, then that ta'zeem and that respect is not mandatory. That's why one of the most fundamental mechanisms of that respect is the ziyarah of these individuals. When you look within the literature, you find that when it comes to the ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt, we have a plenitude of traditions, particularly about the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. You see, when it comes to the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, you find that on the night of Qadr, we have a ziyarah for Imam al-Hussein. That on the 15th of Sha'ban, we have a ziyarah for Imam al-Hussein. Upon the day of Eid, we have a ziyarah for Imam al-Hussein. In the beginning of Rajab, we have a ziyarah for Imam al-Hussein. On the day of Arba'een, on the day of Ashura, and further than that, every Laylatul Jummah, Friday night, what do we recite? We recite the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. In other words, within all of these occasions, you find one line is common amongst all of these ziyarat. And that is that line where you say, As-salamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. You see, amongst the Arabs, when you had a title which was given, either it is a historical kunya, or you find that it is a virtue which that individual embodies. When you look at the historical records, even if Imam al-Hussein had a son by the name of Abdullah, nobody said the oldest son of the Imam was named Abdullah. So what this goes to show is this title of Imam al-Hussein, Aba Abdullah, is a title which is given for his virtue and his fadila. In other words, anyone who is doing the ibadat and the worship of Allah, Hussein is their spiritual father. Anyone who is doing that ibadat, they look towards Karbala and they say, Salam be upon the one who is the father of the servants of Allah. You see, Imam al-Hussein is that individual that even though on all of these different occasions they may differ, we remember him because it is you, we recognize the reality of ibadah. You see, when you come to the ziyarah literature, there is a number of etiquettes and adab which I'll discuss in this majlis about how one approaches the ziyarah literature and how one approaches the ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Now, when it comes to the ziyarat of Ahlul Bayt, the first adab and etiquette of ziyarah is that you recognize the fact that each of these ziyarat were given by the imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In other words, you are not listening to the fadail of Ahlul Bayt from any khatib, any zakir, any orator. Within these ziyarat, you are reciting the fadail of Ahlul Bayt from the tongue of Ahlul Bayt. In other words, these ziyarat are the peak of ishq and love that Muhammad and Ali Muhammad are saying, that we understand that you are our zawar and visitors. And we understand that you are coming to us. But the peak of love is that you don't address us in any way that you want, but rather you address us in the way we've taught you for you to address us. In other words, when you read the ziyarah literature, the image of Imam al-Hussein in Karbala that you're gaining is the image which Imam al-Baqir gives you. And it's that image which Imam al-Sadiq gives you. When anyone tries to skew your understanding of Karbala after you've read these ziyarat, you find that skewing, it won't happen. Why? Because you understood Ahlul Bayt from the tongue of Ahlul Bayt. And you find this is that first adab of ziyarah. That's why you find in one tradition, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Imam al-Sadiq, he says to Mufaddal ibn al-Umar, he says to Mufaddal, إِذَا أَتَيْتَ قَبْرَ الْحُسَيْنِ, O Mufaddal, when you come to the grave of Imam al-Hussein, فَقُفْ بِالْبَابِ وَقُلْ هَذِهِ الْكَلِمَاتِ. That, O Mufaddal, when you come to the grave of Imam al-Hussein, stand at the door and say these words, O Mufaddal. Mufaddal, don't say any other words. وَإِنَّ لَكَ بِكُلِّ كَلِمَةٍ كِفْلًا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Because for each of these words that you recite, which we have given to you, is a portion of the rahmat of Allah. In another tradition, Imam al-Sadiq says to Al-Qama. Al-Qama, of course, is that famous individual who is from amongst the ruwat of Ziyaratul Ashura and the famous dua known as Dua Al-Qama. You find the Imam, he says to Al-Qama, O Al-Qama, ta'ahad hadih ziyara, wad'u bihada dua. That, O Al-Qama, recite this ziyara and recite this dua. فَإِنِّي ضَامِنٌ لِمَنْ زَارَ بِهَذِهِ الزِّيَارَةِ وَدَعَا بِهَذَا الدُّعَاء. That I, Ja'far al-Sadiq, take the zamanat and the responsibility that anyone who recites this ziyarah and he makes this dua, anna ziyaratahu maqbula. That the first sign is the one who recites this ziyarah, which is given by us, Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. The first sign is that his ziyarah is accepted. وَسَعْيَهُ مَشْكُورٌ, and his effort is appreciated by Allah. وَسَلَامَهُ وَاصِلٌ غَيْرُ الْمَحْجُوبِ. That his salam will reach us and there will be no hijab and veil upon that salam. You see, whenever you send salam, the reply to that salam is wajib. When I turn towards Karbala and I say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, it is not within the realm of rationality that the Imam will not reply to my salam. The Imam will reply towards it. But you find, what is the reply of Sayyid al-Shuhada? Over here, the Urafa, they say, that reply is in the form of ma'rifah and understanding. That reply is in the form of the raghba and the desire for the ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt. So you find this is that reality of ziyarah, that when you come to ziyarah, the first adab, the first etiquette of ziyarah is the sheer realization that each of these ziyarat were given to us by Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. The second adab and etiquette of ziyarah is what Ayatollah Bahjat would say is the greatest adab. And he says that greatest adab of ziyarah is that you recognize the fact that there is no difference between the death and the lives of the A'immah. In other words, the hadith, it says, "Man zarana ba'da mautina kaman zarana fi hayatina." That the one who does our ziyarah after our death, they have done our ziyarah, it's as if we were alive when they did that ziyarah. You know, you and I, we have that limitation when we pass away. But these are those individuals who are the misdaq and the reference of the ayat of the Quran. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. That do not say that those killed in the way of Allah are dead, rather they are alive, but you don't perceive their life. You know, when you go to the Ziyarat of Ahlul Bayt, one of the most important du'as that you recite is what is known as idhnu dukhul, the permission to enter. You know, you don't take permission from somebody who is dead. Somebody who is alive, you take permission from that individual. And when you recite this idhnu dukhul, you say, "Ashhadu anna rasulaka wa awliya'ak ahya'un indaka yurzaqun." That, oh Allah, we recognize that your prophet and these awliya, these divine guides of yours, they are alive, they are near you, they are receiving a rizq, and they're receiving sustenance from you. يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامِي وَيَرَوْنَ مَكَامِي وَيَرُدُّونَ salami. These are those individuals, when I come to them, they see my maqam. They hear my kalam and my words. They reply to my salam. These are those individuals who have that cognizance. And when we recite this idhnu dukhul, particularly in Najaf, you find we say the line, "Allahumma bi babika waqaftu." That, oh Allah, I stand at your doorstep. But over here we say, "Oh Imam, we are not at the doorstep of Allah. We are at the doorstep of Ali bin Abi Talib. We are at the doorstep of Sayyid al-Shuhada, of Imam al-Qadim, of Imam al-Askari." At that point, Allah will reply, "These are my doorsteps." That if you want to reach me, go to their ziyarah and say the line, "Allahumma bi babika waqaftu." That, oh Allah, at your door I am standing. These are those individuals. So you find these are those individuals that from the second adab of their ziyarah is that you recognize that there is no difference between the death of these individuals and the life of these individuals. That is why one of the secrets of ziyarah is that you are not doing the ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein, but you are doing the ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein in its reality. In other words, what I mean is that you are not visiting the grave of the Imam, but you are visiting the Imam himself. That's why, in English and Urdu, we say that I made the intention for ziyarah, or I made the niyat for ziyarah. But one of the meanings of the word ziyarah in the Arabic language is that ziyarah itself means qasd and intention. In other words, when you say Ziyarat al-Hussein, you are saying my qasd, my intention is Hussein himself. And when my intention is the Imam, then you find this act of ziyarah will have a profound impact upon my life. Because over here, people, they might ask that question, that if we did not have any evidence in the hadith or the Quran for ziyarah, is there still a rational and an aqlan proof for ziyarah? We have evidence in the Quran. We have evidence in the hadith. But if the Quran was silent and the hadith was silent, in the realm of aql and rationale, is there any proof for ziyarah? You find the answer is yes. Because every single person, they look for what is called tashjee, or motivation. When a child is sitting there, you find when nobody is watching, he acts very different than when his parents are watching. When a child notices his parents are there, his behavior changes. He begins to uphold himself in a higher manner. What he would say amongst his friends, he doesn't dare say that in front of his parents. In other words, when we go to the ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt, you find that it motivates the soul of an individual. That I, as a follower of Ahlul Bayt, I have come to the door of Ali bin Abi Talib, the peak of adalat and justice. Where is the justice within my life? I have come to the ziyarah of Imam al-Hassan, who would give away his wealth 2 times in his life, all of his wealth. Where is the generosity in my life? I have come to the door of Hussein, who sacrificed a son like Ali Akbar. Where is sacrifice within my life? In other words, one of that practical, that rational proofs for ziyarah is ziyarah motivates an individual to mirror the attributes of the one whose ziyarat they are doing. So you find from the first level, the first adab and etiquette of ziyarah is to recognize these ziyarat are given to us by Ahlul Bayt. The second adab and etiquette of ziyarah is that you recognize there is no difference between the death and the life of these individuals. The third etiquette of ziyarah is to recognize that motivation which ziyarah it gives you. But from the fourth level, when it comes to this question of ziyarah, you find we need to understand that ziyarah is from amongst the sha'air of Imam al-Hussein. Now, we often hear this term in majalis, sha'air al-Husayniyah. But in reality, what is a sha'air? And for us to understand what is a sha'air and what is ziyarah in its essence, we need to understand a concept in philosophy. In philosophy, we say that oftentimes you have entities that the matter is the same, the madda is the same, but the surah and the form, it differs. And I'll give you a very simple example for you to understand. The madda and the matter of this mimbar is wood. The form is this mimbar. When you have a table or a chair, you find that the matter can be wood, but the form is the form of the table and the chair. Oftentimes, different things, their matter and their form have no relationship. They're completely separate. For example, from the ground, an animal comes. From the minerals of the ground, a human can come. From the minerals of the ground, a plant can come. There's no relationship. But oftentimes, from the same matter, you find the form, it keeps changing and it's going in the direction of kamal and perfection. For example, from the minerals in the ground, a seed is there. That seed turns into a plant. That plant, it grows and it begins to give fruit, and you find the form is moving in perfection. You see, this discussion came into Islamic history at 2 levels. The first level where this philosophical discussion was of relevance is the discussion about whether our reward in paradise is different from our actions, or is our reward in paradise the same madda, the same action in a different form? You know, the Quran says, وَتُجْزَوْنَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. O human being, your reward is what you used to do. In other words, that action itself is the reward. In this dunya, in this world, the form of that action is carrying out that action. But in the hereafter, you find the form is that jaza and that reward which you're given. For example, the hadith says, the one who says, La ilaha illallah, he'll be given a tree in paradise. In this dunya, the form is La ilaha illallah. In the hereafter, the form is that tree in paradise. And when you've understood this concept, you've understood something which is very profound. And that is that reality that Jannat and heaven is being created upon this earth. That in reality, you are creating your heaven. And when you look at the ayat of the Quran, when they speak of paradise, right, they use that demonstrated pronoun for afar. For example, the Quran says, Tilkal Jannah nurituha min ibadina man kana taqiya. That heaven, that is for something which is far away. That heaven,
will be inherited by those of our servants who are taqi and who are pious. That is the mechanism of the Quran. The Quran says that heaven, O human being, don't become complacent. Work for it. It is not near you. It is something which is far from you. But I send my salam upon Sayyid al-Shuhada, that on the night of Laylatul Ashura, when he speaks to Nafi bin Hilal, he doesn't say that paradise, O Nafi. He says, O Nafi, Ya Kiram, O my companions, Hadihil Jannat qad futihat abwabuha. That, O my companions, this paradise which is in front of you, its doors are already open for you. In other words, that route, that fastest route to paradise, amongst them is the service of Sayyid al-Shuhada. You know, the ashab of Imam al-Hussein are those individuals that the Qari and the reciters of the Quran were on the side of Imam al-Hussein. The Imam says to Habib, Yarhamukallah ya Habib, laqad kunta takhtimul Qur'ana fi laylatin wahida. That, oh Habib, you would finish the Quran in one night. The prayers of Salat were on the side of Imam al-Hussein. But you find when you read their Ziyara, that is not mentioned as their greatest virtue. But in the Ziyara, the greatest virtue of the ashab of Imam al-Hussein is when you say, Assalamu alaikum wa alal arwah allati hallat bifinaik. That, O ashab of Imam al-Hussein, your greatest virtue is that you became fana and annihilated at the doorstep of Hussein. You know, whenever you look at the Maqtal, right, and I say this line with full responsibility, whenever any of the companions of Imam al-Hussein were passing away, either they would say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, or alayka minni salam, or they would send some form of salam as their final words. I say, doesn't the hadith say the one who says La ilaha illallah in their final moments has gained paradise? Do the ashab of Imam al-Hussein not know this reality about the deen? But you find no one is saying La ilaha illallah in their final moment within the maqatil. If they're saying anything, they're saying Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. In other words, they're showing that our tawheed is Hussein. In other words, our path to salvation to Allah is this individual. And that's why when you read their ziyarah, you don't just say that you are the companions of Hussein. You say, Assalamu alayka ya ansara deen Allah. That, oh individuals, when you supported Hussein, you weren't just the ansar of Imam al-Hussein, but you became the ansar of the deen of Allah. Assalamu alaikum ya ansar Rasulullah. Assalamu alayka ya ansar Amir al-Mu'mineen. That you are the ansar of Rasulullah, of Ali ibn Abi Talib, of Fatima Zahra, of Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein alayhim as-salam. So you find these individuals, they achieved that status. Why? Because they created this paradise upon this earth. So this discussion of matter and form from the first level was practical in Islamic history when it came to the discussion of our a'mal. And the ulama, they concluded, according to the ayat of the Quran, our reward in paradise are those actions but in a different form. But at the second level, this discussion was useful in understanding the stages of Iman. They said when it came to Iman, the madda and the matter is one. Belief in Allah and His Prophet, and of course by extension of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. But the form, it differs. And when you look in the Quran, you find that there are 3 stages of Iman. The first stage of Iman is that when God created the human being, in his fitrah and his nature, belief was there. The Quran, it says, فَأَقْهِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةُ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. That, O human being, that establish yourself upon the deen. And that deen God created within your primordial nature. In other words, the belief in Allah is within us. It's in our nature. That's why when an atheist comes to Imam as-Sadiq and he says that, what is Allah? Guide me to Allah. The Imam says, oh man, have you ever been upon a ship? Now the Imam didn't have to ask, what is your past history? Are you a shipsman? Are you this? The Imam knew the answer. And he says, have you ever been upon a ship? Hal rakibta safinata qat? The man says, yes, I've been on a ship. The Imam says, has that ship ever capsized? Has it ever turned over? He said, yes, once it turned over. The Imam says, was there anyone around you? He says, no one was around me. The Imam says, were you hopeless or were you hopeful at that moment? He says, even when no one was around me, in the middle of the ocean, there was hope within my heart. The Imam says that ummeed and that hope is a dalil and an evidence that Allah exists. That even in that moment of apparent hopelessness, you look towards a higher power to help you. This shows in your nature there is Iman. But at the second level, when that Iman it develops, you find it goes from our nature to our rationale. That's why as we're children, our parents, they teach us about the deen. They teach us about Allah, the Prophet, the Ahlul Bayt. And the Quran says that these individuals, they're respectable individuals because they reach that second level. الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ. That these are those individuals who remember Allah sitting, standing upon their sides. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And they reflect over the creation of the heavens and the earth. In other words, they are going through an intellectual process of reflecting upon the heavens and the earth. And when they reflect upon the heavens and the earth, وَيَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And when they reflect upon this universe, they reach one conclusion, and that is to say, oh Allah, everything has a purpose. Nothing was created without purpose. And if everything has a purpose, then save us from your azab and your punishment, oh Allah. So you find at the second level, these individuals, they reach that Iman in their intellect. But for something to be in the intellect isn't the highest level. Because Islam is a deen. And a deen is something which is present within every fiber of your wujud and being. That's why the highest level of Iman is of ahsas and realization. And that's why the Quran, it says that there is a group of individuals who realize the truth. And it says, وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ تَرَى أَعْيُنَهُمْ تَفِيضُ مِنَ الدَّمِّ مِمَّا عَرَفُوا مِنَ الْحَقِّ. That there is a group of people that, O Rasulullah, when they hear what was revealed unto the Prophet, you see that they begin to cry because they recognize the haqq. So you find these are the three stages of Iman. Now I come to the discussion of what is a sha'air within the Quran and what are the sha'air of Imam al-Hussein. You see, the Quran, it says, Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'air Allah. That Safa and Marwa, these mountains, are from amongst God's sha'air. It says, Wal budna ja'alnaha lakum min sha'air Allah. That animal which you sacrifice at Hajj, that animal is a sha'air. You see, a sha'air is something which takes you to a higher level of Iman. In other words, when you have an intellectual understanding, a sha'air can take it to the level of ahsas and realization. You know, when you go to Hajj, each of us knows that we stay away from shaitan. But the moment when you go to Hajj and you throw the rocks at the shayateen, when you physically carry out this action, that intellectual understanding becomes a part of your being and it becomes at the level of asas and realization. Now when somebody asks about the sha'air of Imam al-Hussein, that why do you need an alam? Why do you need a tabut? Why do you need all of these replicas? You say that all of these replicas, that understanding in the mind we have of Hussein, we want to take it to the level of ahsas and realization. That's why when you lift the tabut, even though each of us say that, oh Hussein, if we were there in Karbala, we wouldn't let your body be upon the ground. But when you lift that tabut, you find that asas and that realization, it comes of your wafa and your loyalty to Sayyid al-Shuhada. And that's why from amongst the greatest of the sha'air is the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Because that ziyarah brings asas and realization. And in that sense, you find ziyarah is a symbol of our deen. Imam is Sadiq in a tradition, he says, the Imam, he says, Manzar al-Hussein yawm Ashura wa bata inda qabrihi. That the one who does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura and he stays, he spends the night by the grave of Imam al-Hussein, kama stushhida bayna yadayhi. That individual is like the individual who attained shahadat with Imam al-Hussein. In other words, this ziyarah is a symbol. That's why time and time again in history, they would try to destroy the grave of Imam al-Hussein. That how many times did al-Mutawakkil try to destroy the grave of the Imam? You know, it's stated that there was a lady that she would go to the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein from Baghdad. And when she would go from Baghdad, when they would reach the outskirts of Baghdad, they would cut the right arm of anyone going to the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. As she's going to the Imam's ziyarah, the man says, "Oh lady, turn around." She says, "No, I won't turn around." The man says, "Then you know what I have to do." She says, "Do what you must." She lifts her left hand. That man says that you know that we cut the right hand, not the left hand. She says, "Oh man, my right hand I gave for Hussein last year when I went for the ziyarah. Now I'm ready to give that other hand in the way of Abu Abdullah." You see, this is what people went through for the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. What we take for granted, people would spill their blood when it came to the ziyarah of the Imam. And we have traditions that what you spend out of your wealth to go to the ziyarah of the Imam will return to you. In Kamil Ziyarat, we have a tradition, that time of your life which you spend upon ziyarah, that journey, Allah will not include that in the span of your life. That look how Kareem Sayyid al-Shuhada is. That even that time which is spent to go to ziyarah, the Imam is saying, don't think that time will not be returned. Even that time, I will give that back towards you. This is who Abu Abdullah al-Hussein is. And that's why when you look about the traditions about ziyarah, the first hadith, the first tradition we have about ziyarah comes even before the day of Ashura. But after the day of Ashura, we find that it occurs upon the 11th of Muharram. When the 11th of Muharram it came, as Imam Zainul Abidin was going past the cut body of his father, the hadith it says, تَغَيَّرَ لَوْنُ وَجْهِ زَيْنِ الْعَابِدِينَ. At that moment, the color upon the face of Imam Sajjad begins to change. And when Sayyida Zainab, she sees Imam Zainul Abidin, she says, "Mali araka atajudu binafsik ya baqiyata jaddi wa abi wa ikhwati." That why is it Sajjad, oh the remnant of my grandfather and my father and my brother? It's as if I see that your soul is about to leave your body, O Sajjad. Imam Zainul Abidin says to Sayyida Zainab, "Wa kayfa la adza?" That, oh my aunt, how can I not have this grief? I see the body of my father broken into pieces in front of me, oh my aunt. At that moment, Sayyida Zainab says to Imam Zainul Abidin, "Dhalika ahadun min Allah ila Rasulullah." That is a ahad and a covenant which Allah gave to Rasulullah, which he took from your father and your uncle and your brother. But then after that, Sayyida Zainab speaks to Imam Sajjad and she tells him the reality of this ziyarah. You see, Imam Zainul Abidin is a ma'soom Imam. The Imam knows about the reality of ziyarah. But that was that heartbreaking moment in history where Zainab had to cool the heart of Imam Zainul Abidin, and she says, O Sajjad, وَيَنْسَبُونَ لِهَذَا التَّفْعَلَ مَنْ لِقَبْرِ عَبِيكَ سَيِّدُ الشُّهَدَاء, that Allah will place a sign upon the grave of your father Sayyid al-Shuhada, وَلَا يَجْتَهِدَنَّ أَئِمَّةُ الْكُفْرِ وَأَشْيَاءُ الدَّلَالَةِ فِي مَحْوِهِ وَتَطْمِيسِهِ. But the imams of misguidance, the followers of those who are astray, they will try to destroy this grave. But O Sajjad, the more they try to destroy it, the more Allah will elevate it. And the more they try to hide it, the more its truth and its reality will be known. That this is the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. You see, today we've entered upon the shab of the 7th of Safar. According to one riwayah, tonight is the shahada of that brother of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Because one riwayah says upon this day, and another riwayah it says the 28th of Safar. You know who is Imam al-Hasan? Allam al-Majlisi in Bihar al-Anwar. He records a line of poetry that Imam al-Hussein said at the grave of Imam al-Hasan. And what did Imam al-Hussein say? He said, "Oh my brother Hassan, after you never will Hussein dye his hair again. And oh my brother Hassan, a lost person is not somebody who has lost mal and wealth, but a person who is lost is the one who has lost a brother like Hassan al-Mujtaba." You know, there are many similarities between the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein and the martyrdom of Imam al-Hassan. You see, one level of similarity is that both of their bodies were covered in arrows. Imam al-Hussein was alive, the arrows would go into the body of Hussein. But when the janazah of Imam al-Hassan was lifted, you find that arrows were fired into the janazah of Imam al-Hassan. You know, when Imam al-Hassan was poisoned, a point it came when he began to vomit the pieces of his liver out. When he was vomiting the pieces of his liver, he says to Imam al-Hussein, "Oh my brother, cover these pieces." Imam al-Hussein says, "Oh my brother, why should I cover them?" Imam al-Hassan says, "I don't want Zainab to see me in this moment. But I say, oh Imam al-Hassan, what about the day of Ashura? When that time would come, وَالشِّمَرْ جَالِسٌ عَلَى صَدْرِ الْحُسَيْنِ, shimmer would be upon the chest of Imam al-Hussein. Zainab would watch from Tilla Zainabiyya. Zainab would say, Ya Rasulallah, هذا حسين المرمل بالدماء. That, oh Rasulallah, this is your Hussein who is covered in blood, Ya Rasulallah. At that moment, Imam al-Hussein, he begins to cry. Imam al-Hassan says, "Atabki alayya ya Aba Abdullah." That, oh Hussein, are you crying over me? Abki alayk, but oh Hussein, I cry over you, oh Aba Abdullah. La yawmaka yoka yawmik ya Hussein. Oh Hussein, in reality, there is no day like your day, oh Aba Abdullah. You know, it's stated, the final moments of Imam al-Hassan, they come. Imam al-Hassan is upon his deathbed. At that point, a 3-year-old child comes to the chest of Imam al-Hassan. When that child comes to the chest of Imam al-Hassan, Farwa wants to remove that child. Imam al-Hassan says, "O Farwa, let my Qasim sit upon my chest, O Farwa. And O Farwa, I am giving you this taweez, I am giving you this letter. When that day it comes, when my brother Hussein is ghariban wahidan farida, upon that day, this Qasim of mine will be my representative." You know how difficult it was for Imam al-Hussein to look at Qasim? That on Shab-e Ashura, when the names of all of the shuhada was given, it was only Qasim who the Imam says, "Kayf al-maut indak ya Qasim?" That, "O Qasim, how do you find death?" You know, on the day of Ashura, everyone would go, Qasim would wait. And as Qasim's waiting, a point it comes, Qasim, he begins to cry. And Farwa would say, "Oh Qasim, why are you crying?" Qasim says, "My uncle isn't giving me permission." Farwa says, "Oh Qasim, your father had given a taweez, a letter. Go take this towards your uncle." When Qasim, he goes, Sayyid ibn Tawus, he writes something which is only written about the final farewell of Qasim. He says at that moment, فَنَظَرَ إِلَيْهِ, that Imam al-Hussein looks at Qasim, فَغَشِيَ عَلَيْهِمَا, and at that moment they begin to cry to such a point that holding each other, both Imam al-Hussein and Qasim, they fall unconscious upon the ground. At that moment, Sayyid al-Shuhada, he looks at the letter. He says, "Oh Qasim, I've given you permission." You know, when Qasim is going towards the Maqtal, right? Hamid ibn Muslim, he says that I saw a young man, كَأَنَّ وَجْهَهُ شَقَّةُ الْقَمَرِ. His face was like the crescent moon when he came out of the tent. And when I was watching him, I noticed that his sandal was too large for him. And Imam al-Hussein would come out and with his hand he would place the sandal of Qasim. You know, when Qasim goes on the day of Ashura, Sheikh Jafar Shushtari, he says that why did Imam al-Hussein only say to Qasim, "How is death towards you?" You know what Sheikh Jafar Shushtari says? He says as Qasim is fighting, a point it comes, فَقَتَلُوهُ إِرْبًا إِرْبًا, that from all sides they surround Qasim. A point it comes, they hit the head of Qasim. The foot of Qasim, it gets caught upon the horse. At that moment, the body of Qasim is dragged through the plains of Karbala. The body of Qasim begins to break into pieces. Sheikh Jafar Shushtari says, the reason Imam al-Hussein only asked Qasim is that every other shaheed, after they died, their body was trampled. Qasim is that one shaheed. Qasim was alive. The body of Qasim was broken to pieces. You know, when Qasim, he goes to the ground, he says, "Ya Amma adrikni," that, "Oh my uncle, help me." You know, the Imam, at the body of each of the shuhada, he would say a line. At the body of Abbas, he said, "Al-an inkasara dahri," that, "Oh Abbas, now my back is broken." At the body of Akbar, he said, "Ala dunya ba'daka la faya li Akbar." "Oh Akbar, may this world become dust." But you know what the Imam says at the body of Qasim? The Imam says, "Oh Qasim, what will I tell your mother, oh Qasim, that you were calling your uncle Hussein was able to help you. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين. ماتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
ہائے نہ محمل ہے نہ محمل ہے نہ ہودج ہے نہ لشکر کی وہ سج دھج ہے نہ سر پہ علم نہ چادر ہے اللہ یہ کیسا منظر ہے مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران وطن میں آتے ہیں سفر سے آتے ہیں سوغات درد لاتے ہیں مسافران میں آتے ہیں کیا سلام محمد کے آستانے کو کٹا کے آئے ہیں زہرا کے سب گھرانے کو نہ کر قبول تو ہم بے قصوں کے آنے کو یہ نوحہ کرتے ہیں اور اشک خون بہاتے ہیں مسافران مدینہ ہم مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مدینہ ہم تیرے والی کو آئے ہیں کھو کر مدینہ کوفے میں سر ننگے ہم پھرے در در مدینہ داغ رسن ہے ہمارے شانوں پر اٹھا کے ہاتھ مدینے کو یہ سناتے ہیں مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران آتے ہیں ہر ایک قدم ہے بکا کب لبوں پہ بین نہیں ہم آئے زندہ پا زہرا کا نور عین نہیں مدینہ اکبر و قاسم نہیں حسین نہیں یہ کیسے کیسے جوان ہے جو یاد آتے ہیں فران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں مسافران آتے ہیں مدینہ والوں کا ہو اس بہن کی کیا تقدیر جو دیکھے اپنے برادر کے حلق پر شمشیر لاہو میں غرق جو دیکھے حسین کی تصویر لاہو میں کیا یوں ہی بھائی کا سر دکھاتے ہیں مسافر وطن میں آتے ہیں بتاؤ کہتے ہیں نسب اس اما جائی کو جو 40 تلک دے کفن نہ بھائی کو. بہن دکھائے گی منہ کس طرح خدائی کو, کفن دیا ہے نہ ان کی لحد بناتے ہیں مسافر. مسافران مصیبت ہیں, چلا بشیر یہ دیتا ہوا خبر ہر جاں, مگر محل ہاشم میں دیکھتا ہے کیا کہ ایک مریض سرے راہ ہے کھڑی تنہا, ہے منتظر کہ وہ کنبے کے لوگ آتے ہیں. مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں, آتے ہیں. خبر یہ پھیلی تو ماتم ہر ایک گھر میں ہوا, نکل نکل پڑی سب عورتیں برہ نہ پا, گری زمین پہ سغرا کے اس پر چرخ گرا, جو سوگوار ہیں سغرا کے پاس آتے ہیں. مسافر میں آتے ہیں, فضائے درد میں لے کر اداسیاں آئیں, سفر سے لٹ کے ادھر بھوک کی پیاسیاں آئیں. اٹھو رسول تمہاری نواسیاں آئیں, کہ خود کو اونٹوں سے اہل حرم گراتے ہیں. مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں, مسافران آتے ہیں. جو آئی کان میں آواز بانو اے مزدر, کہا ہو اے میرے والی امام جن و بشر, تڑپ کے رہ گئی سغرا بپا ہوا محشر, دبیر بس کے اب افلاک تھر تھراتے ہیں. مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں, مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں. سفر سے آتے ہیں سوغات درد لاتے ہیں, مسافران مصیبت وطن میں آتے ہیں. یا حسین 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 یا حسین, حیا علی خیر العمل, حیا علی خیر العمل, حیا علی خیر العمل, حیا علی
اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر پر ہے گرتا عباس کا یہ سر ہے تیور بتا رہے ہیں کیا شام گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں لوگ کس طرح کے ہم سے دعا کرائیں اے قیدیو دعا دو یہ دن نہ ہم پہ آئے لے کر دعائیں ہم سے دل بھی دکھا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں ماؤں کی گودیوں سے لپٹے ہوئے ہیں بچے ہے ہاتھ رسیوں میں ماؤں سے ایسے جکڑے بچے جو گر رہے ہیں وہ مرتے جا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں نیزے پہ رو رہا ہے مشکل کشا کا بیٹا نامحرموں کے لب پر آیا ہے نام میرا مجھ کو کنیز زادے یوں بھی رلا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین وہ عابد بیمار تھا وہ عابد بیمار تھا چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا اور شام کا بازار تھا اور شام کا بازار تھا اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین 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 اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد متوجہ زیارت
السلام علیکم یا ابا عبداللہ السلام علیکم یا ابن رسول اللہ السلام علیکم یا ابن امیر المؤمنین وابن سید الوسیین السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر الأحد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا تمام شهداء كربلاء واسيران كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلطان يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى الرضا رازب القدر والقضاء روحي وجسمي لك الفداء. السلام عليك يا أخت فاطمة المعصومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. هذا أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.
Brother and sister, I request all of you to recite 3 salawat for a brother who is undergoing open heart surgery for his sihat and shifa ajila kamila inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.